Good evening and welcome to the Black College Sports Network. I am Roy Eavins, and we are here for another special edition broadcast. As right now, we have some breaking information. Before I get started with that, though, of course, I am joined by Dr. Kenyatta Cavil of Inside the HBCU SportsLab. And right now with us also is AD Drew of the BCSN SportsWrap. And gentlemen, AD, you put this out there 2-3 months ago, and the dominoes have started falling again. And as we see on the screen, the Bethune-Cookman Wildcats are headed on their way to the Southwestern Athletic Conference. They've had some votes. We're trying to get someone from BCU to come on and speak with us now. But let's start off and get some reactions. AD, we're going to let you start first, and then we're going to come to Doc. But what are your reactions to this?
I'm not going to do the I told you so. I wish I had told you so. Honestly, when I start hearing rumor mills and start doing my contemplating and research and everything like that, you did not. I had an educated guess that this could happen, but as reality is starting to set in, what is the next step to reality? We've got. And I just put this out on my Twitter a few moments ago. Does anybody remember the old Southwest Conference? Dominated football. There were seven teams that were in Texas, and then you had Arkansas. University of Arkansas, 1991, left the Southwestern Conference, moved to the SEC. 5 years later.
AD, I just want to give breaking news. The release has come out. Yeah, and because we need to go down and do that breakdown. Breaking news has just came out from the SWAC office. SWAC announces addition of Bethune-Cookman as full membership. So that has come out. Also, breaking news, MEAC will have a 10 o'clock meeting tomorrow, which I know you had that one, but I wanted to get it out for those that are following us and listening. As we start to break down all components of what's going to take place, as you take us on a historical, we'll link that to the present. Please go ahead, AD.
All right. I'll continue. 1991, Arkansas leads the Southwest Conference, joins the SEC along with South Carolina. SEC ultimately becomes a super conference that we know of today, with the addition of Missouri and Texas A&M about a decade later. Now, fast forward 30 years, 25 years, Hampton leaves the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, joins another conference, and now, as Dr. Cavil likes to use his word, conference churning, it's starting to happen. Hampton leaves the MEAC, North Carolina A&T leaves the MEAC, FAMU leaves the MEAC, and now, as Dr. Cavil has just stated, Bethune has officially put in their papers to leave the MEAC also. So in 2021, just like the Southwestern Conference, where the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference continue to exist. I digress to you, Dr. Cavil.
Yeah, that's a major question. I think everything is pending on the next domino. As we talked about the last time, I thought Bethune-Cookman was not the final domino. If we go back, we've been following this. North Carolina Central had a meeting, their board meeting, and that's where it's really teeters. Everything has to go through the Board of Regents, Board of Trustees, whatever you want. In North Carolina Central, that's a very public and open meeting because it's a public institution, much like Delaware State has been public. So we've heard the fact, if you read the meetings from the Board of Trustees meetings at Delaware State, they have been looking at the athletics of Delaware State and therefore the MEAC over the last 2 meetings. You've heard the information about NSC. We're just getting a report from HBCUsports.com that says that NEC and or the Delaware State will not confirm or deny that they were talking. We can give you an update from North Carolina Central. They released a statement in regards to their reviews where they said that they will continue to monitor what's going on in the MEAC, but at this point they were not moving. So they essentially do not have an invitation at this point to any conference. So they will continue to monitor, be prepared for statements, but they're not moving. So it looks like right now the key indicator to me after this announcement with Bethune-Cookman and the fact that SWAC has accepted them is the fact that Delaware State really holds the key to where the conference will moving forward after at least 1 year. And the reason I say that is you have the threshold of 6 institutions you need to maintain a conference at the Division I level for the basketball money. This is not quite as important on the football side, if you would, because they don't look at the automatic bid to the FCS. They gave that up to go to the Celebration Bowl and the money associated with that. So there's no real threshold on that side other than just the scheduling issues you may have. But as you go to, as Dennis said, it was 7. I looked at the rules and I think it's 6. But that's where you're saying that key number is in terms of basketball. Is it 6 or 7 in regards to you maintaining your automatic bid for the NCAA basketball money? One other thing that is off the table is this reduces the baseball teams in the current MEAC alignment after A&T leaves, FAMU leaves, and Bethune-Cookman leaves in 2021. Now you had 5 baseball programs, so that automatic bid for the NCAA baseball tournament will cease to exist at some point after all these teams leave. So we need to kind of look at this per sport perspective in regards to what does this mean for the conference. Overall, obviously, this conference churning will take place in at 50 years of history in the MEAC. There are extremely concerning circumstances for the MEAC.
Let me jump in, Doc. Really quick, guys, one of the things that I want to say about this situation, though, is that I honestly think that with Bethune-Cookman making this move, to me, this actually is beneficial to the MEAC, because now you have pulled everyone out of that area who may have been worried about the travel and still having to contend to come down to South, down to Florida to play, which was always one of the major challenges as it relates to the conference. I think this is a great opportunity for the MEAC to almost, in essence, reinvent itself in pulling more teams in from that immediate area right there where they are, and making the travel issue no longer an issue for the conference schools. Focusing on that area, the north, I guess you would consider that the northeast part of the country. Maybe some things in the Carolinas, but staying in that area, focusing on some of those teams. We've talked about it before. There are multiple teams that we would assume at this point have the wherewithal and have the ability to jump up and compete and at least balance this thing out with the MEAC. So, I don't necessarily look at this as a bad thing for the MEAC, because I felt that with Bethune-Cookman, if they had stayed in the MEAC, that it was going to take a lot more of a realignment and then making sure that you can find 1 or 2 schools to necessarily bring into a southern region that would make the conference viable to continue on. AD, what were you about to say?
I was going to say the one thing that the MEAC needs to look at, the doc just mentioned that they're down to 5 schools in the for baseball. They need to look at affiliate members, at affiliate membership just for baseball only, so that they could keep those keep that automatic bid. And according to NCAA rules, you can actually get Division II schools if they're willing to play up to Division I for baseball only. So some of those CIAA schools that have baseball and are independents in baseball, they make this. The MEAC needs to look at seeing if they can get them to come into the come into the MEAC for baseball only, so that the MEAC can maintain that that automatic bid right there. Obviously, you have to look at the PWI route. The MEAC does have 3 associate members in other sports: University of Alabama, Birmingham, Augusta State, and I can't recall the third, but I know they do have 3 affiliate members in other sports. Maybe they need to see if they can talk to those members, and I used an analogy on the previous show, the cousins who sleep on your couch every now and then, see if you can go ahead and get them to go ahead and move in and start helping with the bills, or get another one of their programs to come into the MEAC to shore up the MEAC. As far as football is done, the schools of the MEAC will probably wind up as football independents. But the MEAC does not need football to survive. It can become a basketball conference and get a bulk of its money off of basketball, focus on the Olympic sports, and still survive.
I'm gonna disagree.
That's going to be what the MEAC conference needs to look at. Look at the GCAC and the NAIA level. They don't play football. They survive off, even though they're on NAIA level, they survive off of basketball and their other Olympic sports. I digress. One of you gentlemen.
I'm going to jump in on that because I don't really think that is something that is a viable option. There is too much money on the table with the MEAC SWAC Challenge and the Celebration Bowl, and not just money on the table, but as well as prestige that goes along with those events. These schools, the MEAC is now okay. So let's look at the numbers right now. That means the MEAC is down to who all that plays football. We've got South Carolina.
They're down to 6.
North Carolina Central. Let's see. Help me out, fellas. Who we got now?
Norfolk State.
Howard.
Delaware State.
Delaware State. So that means right now they're at 5 schools, correct?
6.
So who was the school that we missed? That I missed?
Well, did you get Morgan?
No, Morgan was the one that I didn't say. Okay. So theoretically, they only need realistically 2 more schools to come in and play football to maintain the
where you gonna find them
thing to make it a balance. What'd you say, Drew?
Where you gonna find those 2 schools at though, Roy? That's the question. Especially in this COVID-19 society, and the fact that you have to pay a $500 entry fee to get into the BA.
Well, I'm going to tell you this.
Well, you can waive
exactly.
That. Just in regards to that, because the SWAC actually has waived the fees, in my understanding, for some of these institutions coming in because they thought they were going to be able to get the revenue later down associated, and this returns for district measures.
Exactly.
So you have that ability to do that. I think, again, as you alluded to, I'm going to split hairs with you because I think between your 2 arguments, if you would, that in the short term, I would agree with you, AD, in regards that you can operate this conference without the expansion of football and still move forward. Long term, I do think we need football viability to make it work. I think we also need to be careful in regards to, there is a whole year for this transition. This is not immediately. This does not take place in the fall. And there's obviously a lot of questions with COVID-19, whether we're going to have a football season. And the way things are going, if we keep having these politicians make some of the decisions they made, we might not even get basketball in regards to the major sports leading into winter. So with that framing, I think it'll be interesting to see what will come out tomorrow in terms of the MEAC press conference, which I think is extremely important and interesting before we get too much deep in the weeds about putting dirt on the MEAC, if you would. I think obviously a lot is when you play with these numbers, there's a question that we need to get some clarity on. Like when Dr. Thomas came in another interview, there was the framework of needing 7 institutions to be viable and them playing together for 8 years to hold the conference to have automatic bids. As I last remember the rules, there were 6, and obviously a lot was going on, so that could have been just a misinterpretation, or he may be looking at something specific. But that's something that we really need to have clarity on, whether it's 6 or 17, because that demarcation is key in regards to where we are with basketball and that revenue associated with that. Because as we said, short term, this conference can certainly survive with 5. And let me give you a plain example of why that can take place. We just talked about A&T going to the Big South. Big South operated with 5 conference members playing football for the longest. And so they didn't have the automatic bid to the FCS tournament, but they were still able to do what they needed to do in terms of scheduling a conference. They were able to have a conference winner, which is important in regards to what we're doing for the MEAC SWAC Challenge, as well as the Celebration Bowl. If you have a conference champion, that team can go play in the Celebration Bowl. Will it necessarily be good for branding in the short term? Obviously not, but it's something that can get you over to the fold for a year or two until you can work with some Division II conferences or that have football or affiliated memberships, if you would, to do that. There's also another note, as you talked about the individual sports with baseball, that we need to be put out there playing. You can do a petition. You can petition the NCAA for them to give you like a year release on your automatic bid. That has been done before. It's been done at the Division II level, but I'm almost sure that you do not lose that automatic bid again, immediately as well. So again, you got a full year that will not take place before these teams exit, which is next fall, which means you have some time, not a lot, but you do have some time to recalibrate what is going on in the MEAC in association. So I wanted to get that on the table so there's some clarity in some of this dialogue that's taking place.
And guys, here's another thing I think we need to consider when we're talking about this. You'd have to think that Commissioner Thomas and the Council of Presidents, after FAMU made their decision and made their move, that they got aggressive behind the scenes. I would be shocked and amazed that if tomorrow we're having some conversations about some potential, if we're not having conversations about potential members coming in multiple scenarios. Like you said, some folks may be coming in just for affiliate sports to cover those things in football, affiliate, in baseball to maintain the automatic bid, and the same thing in basketball. I don't think that that's going to be too much of an issue. And like I said, we've even talked about it. I know I never did put out my my whole realignment setup, but like I said, that to me, that's one of the things that I thought that the MEAC should do was focus on that northeast area and try to pull in teams from, say, the CIAA, who were looking at that. But again, remember, as it was mentioned, my plan was a little bit more comprehensive because as I talked about the MEAC pulling schools from the CIAA, I was also looking at the perception of having the CIAA pull in schools from other places. As an example, if they were to lose Bowie State to the MEAC, West Virginia State was one of the immediate schools that I said that you bring in to replace Bowie State in the CIAA. It puts them still in that same area, and you're able to do some different things. I know we talked about, who was it, Shawan? Did they leave the CIAA because of the basketball, or they
left, except for they're only in the football. They left because of baseball, because the CIAA right. Dropped baseball. Was one of the main reasons that they left.
Okay.
Right.
So yeah,
right.
Those are some of the things, man. I really think that there are these, like I said, there are opportunities out there that this is not a death sentence for the MEAC to me. This is really an opportunity for the MEAC to strengthen itself to a point that will make it a more viable, I don't want to say better, I want to say more viable financially as a conference. Because here's what you got to realize, and this is the thing that I tell people, and Doc, I'm sure you can attest to this, especially in football, but when you start talking about your non-revenue generating sports or your Olympic sports, it is always best to create regional rivalries. People, as far as fans, need to be able to travel within an 8-hour time frame at the most. And you'll get fans who will travel and who will pick up and drive to a city for a day trip to be able to watch their team play. You'll get those types of regional activities that are going to happen. That was the biggest challenge with both Bethune-Cookman and FAMU in the MEAC. I mean, let's get real. there were times that we played at Howard where there seemed to be more FAMU people in the stands than Howard people when we went there. And we're talking about for both sports, for both major sports. So I really believe that this is going to give the opportunity for the MEAC to reinvent itself as a stronger and much more financially viable conference. I think it's going to help. It's the catalyst to help the MEAC SWAC Challenge as well as the Celebration Bowl both grow to an entirely different level, because now those are we're really looking at a north versus south type of a situation now. Because you're usually going to have those types of situations where the bulk of your players are, of course, going to be from those areas. But I mean, like I said, I would be shocked that if tomorrow, Commissioner Thomas is not talking about some plans that they have to do just that, to strengthen the MEAC with the membership, because they had to have known that this was coming with Bethune-Cookman, because it was not financially feasible for Bethune-Cookman to stay in the MEAC once Florida A&M left. It just wasn't, and we all knew that. It was just a matter of, well, what is their option going to be about where they're going to try to go.
Yeah, I think you bring up some extremely important points in context for us to continue to consider as we break this down even further. Just wanted to give one update in regards to the Conference Carolinas in Shawan. Shawan was accepted as they earned their invitation to the Conference Carolina in the summer of 2019, and it was for full membership.
All right. And as you all can see,
Conference Carolinas does not play football, which is why they still play football in the CIAA. Am I correct on that?
Right.
Yeah. So now they're just an associate member of the CIAA.
Correct.
And first of all, I want to say welcome to my partner in crime on the SportsWrap, Bryan Fulford, who joined us. It's kind of tough with breaking news. I think everybody had a little bit of other stuff they were going on today. People had to drop what they were doing to get on this important conversation. So, how you doing there, Bryan?
What's going on, guys? What's new? Anything new happening in the world today?
No, just a little bit. COVID-19.
Just a little.
Anything other than COVID-19 reported cases rising in Florida? Anything else happening in Florida today?
Bryan,
the NFL canceled their preseason game, the Hall of Fame game. That's the only other thing happening in sports right now.
There we go.
Bryan, why don't we've gotten everybody else's opinion on this thing, man. Let's hear what your thought process is. What do you think about this? One from a BCU perspective, and then in the context of the MEAC, what do you think is going to happen, or what should happen moving forward? And he pulls his helmet off.
I'm trying to get my audio issues straight.
While Bryan
he's fixing that.
Works on his audio issues. I'm going to ask both of you guys about this. No one still has tackled the elephant in the room, as I like to say. Tennessee State.
That's
still the big elephant in the room.
Well, let's get Bryan. It sounds like we got you now, man. Let's get you in on that, because honestly I don't see where Tennessee State.
Because I want a piece of that Tennessee State once Bryan gives his voluminous ideas of what's taking place between the Bethune-Cookman and how his perspective of what this means for the MEAC. So I think, Roy, that's a great question. But yeah, let me go on the Tennessee State Tigers once he does his magic on the rest.
Well, I guess my first thought is congratulations, Bethune-Cookman. Welcome to the SWAC, as I call it, the SWAC 12 now. I think I'm part of the SWAC 12. Everyone's logoed up, huh? But look, how do I get down with this? Everybody else is logoed up, man. I got to get to the SWAC shop.
Yeah, we're gonna have to make sure they send us some good stuff.
Yeah, I'll pimp some SWAC gear now. Everyone else is, so.
It's certainly
But no, I mean it's a good move for their athletic program. I guess as we were talking about this over the past few days since the Board of Trustees meeting, I've been sort of digging at just, what Bethune-Cookman's athletic program has been doing over the past decade. And I was talking to an alum earlier today, and he was saying, over the past 20 years, and he's probably right, but they've had a strong football program, 2 strong basketball programs, men and women's, strong softball, strong baseball. I'm probably missing out on some other sports as well, but they have built themselves into a top level FCS program. And I think that's what the SWAC is getting now. They're getting another top tier program who's had a great decade. And I think it just adds more value to the SWAC brand, which eventually, when the SWAC that we've heard Dr. McClelland already say it, his long range vision is for the SWAC to become a FBS member and to hopefully participate in some of those postseason bowls and some of that great bowl money that's out there for conferences. This just adds value. So great move for the SWAC. I think it makes it keeps an interesting rivalry with Florida A&M. And, the SWAC has already been playing some good, the Bethune-Cookman has already been playing some good SWAC opponents over the past few years. And so I think that just continues to grow as well.
So, Doc, before you jump into your comment, I want to bring up a statement that I saw somebody making in the SWAC group. Here's what we have to imagine now. Just think about this, that the Florida Classic and the Bayou Classic could end up being a prelude every year to the SWAC championship game. Think about the impact on that now that you've officially added the Florida Classic into that SWAC bowl of classic games, and just the impact that is going to have on how this is going to move stuff, man. It is going to be, listen, I'm excited about it. I think for people like us and what we do, this is going to be a great time when we get back to sports as regular.
Can I chime in on that point? Do you think the Florida Classic would move to the same weekend as the Bayou Classic?
No, they moved away from Thanksgiving.
It would be an interesting.
They'll never do it. They'll never do it. They moved away from Thanksgiving on purpose years ago. The Florida Classic used to be on Thanksgiving weekend, and it was too much. People didn't want to do it. That's why they moved to before Thanksgiving. They will not move to that same weekend. It won't happen.
Yeah, I don't think they have to, because you create another way where you have competing interests in terms of the weekend. Now, television-wise, if a new contract comes in play and the money gets so big in terms of the contract that the television people push it, then I think that's another reason to look at it. But outside of that, I couldn't necessarily see that. But I will add this to your comment in terms of Florida Classic and Bayou Classic. I certainly say for the Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M, as well as Grambling State and Southern University fans, that they certainly want that to come to fruition. But there are a couple of other, 8 other, to be specific, 8 other SWAC institutions that you frankly give a damn about whether that would be for a championship. Now, they are excited about the fact that they are in the place, but no, everybody's not going to be excited about that. But that's a great point in regards to that. I think a bigger component of that, alluding to what they're putting on the table, which is the fact that you have, think about this. You have the State Fair Classic, 50,000 plus. You have
Magic City.
No, I'm going to do them in order. The Southern Heritage Classic, right? Which is Jackson State and Tennessee State, which will get me to my point, which is the oddball looking out now. Then you have the Magic City Classic, which is all SWAC, just like the State Fair Classic, 50,000 plus. You have the Florida Classic, 50,000 plus. FAMU Bethune-Cookman, now all SWAC. You have the Bayou Classic, 50,000 plus. Grambling State and Southern, all SWAC. of all those are the top 5 classics in the country, if you would, right? In terms of attendance, the only oddball out is Tennessee State. It'll be interesting to see the calculus in terms of Tennessee State. While they say, they were good where they are right now, they had some. They were looking at what was taking place in the SWAC. You had the athletic director interviewing on Open Mic Network. Dr. Michael Prince interviewed the athletic director at Tennessee State. Dr. I think of his name, excuse me, get it to come back to me. And he said that, he had some interest. A lot of good things are going on, but they liked the fact that they had the mix between the OVC and the HBCU. What happens now with them being in the alumni? What if the SWAC looks at moving from just an 8-game conference to a 9-game conference, like you see these other schools, institutions, and conferences doing? That took place with the Pac-12. We've heard that taking place in regards to the Big Ten. Most recently, you heard them talking about doing that to the SEC. Obviously, that takes place in a different format in the Big 12. And a lot of that is because television drives the revenue component. And they are looking for more revenue-generating components in the conference. And that 9th game, if you would, becomes extremely important to the media. It gives them more inventory. You see this taking place in basketball, where they move from most conferences doing 16, where they move to 18, and now you got the Pac-12, the Big Ten looking at going 20 games. What if that happens in the SWAC in terms of them looking at a 20-game month? But more importantly, in football, what does that do with Tennessee State and the availability of SWAC teams to be able to play Tennessee State, particularly regularly in a matchup? So Tennessee State could be in a real peculiar situation that they didn't necessarily take advantage of being a 12th team, not because the SWAC would maybe purposely freeze them out, but just because in terms of conference scheduling and the fact that you go to a 9-game conference, if you would, model, so you can get the extra inventory, particularly with the contract coming up with ESPN to renegotiate and saying, hey, we can give you these matchups with these 4 conference classics, and on an odd year with Jackson State as the home team, that classic, as well as the championship game, Tennessee State need to really start to thinking about what really makes sense in terms of them not being able to schedule a game, because the other 2 games that you want to left, you want to play money games. And if the money games pay you more than what you get for playing Tennessee State, that becomes a major concern for Tennessee State trying to schedule games that they like in their non-conference schedule, because the availability is no longer there.
I think Tennessee State's going to be traveling to the DMV to pick up one of these remaining MEAC teams trying to fill up their schedule, because, like you said, the SWAC teams won't be available. Also, Dr. Cavil, I'm ashamed that you forgot to mention the Turkey Day Classic. Even though it doesn't have the draw as those other classics, can you imagine Thanksgiving weekend starting off in Orlando, Florida on Saturday? Then you go to Montgomery, Alabama on that Thursday, and then you go on to New Orleans, Louisiana for the Bayou on that Saturday. I usually take 10 days off during that time anyway. I see 3 different games during that 10 days that I get off during Thanksgiving week.
I didn't forget them, AD. And I'm sorry, Brian, I'll let you jump in. I didn't forget them, but I knew you were going to find a way to make a case for Tuskegee. So I was just giving you a fastball in regards to what's going in there. And I was going. No, I'm just saying Tuskegee in terms of that. Yeah, you're right in regards to that. Looked up, but I knew you were trying to sneak Tuskegee in this conversation was my overall point. And so, no, not for the Turkey Day, but as this conference expansion, if Tennessee State comes in as 13, everybody gonna look for that 14 seat. So now you're talking about Clark, Atlanta, back to Albany State. Is it Langston? Is it Tuskegee? Miles College? I see you putting in the work, brother. You're really good at what you do. You're really good. I like that.
The only reason I bring up Turkey Day because now the SWAC has made Turkey Day a conference game.
Correct.
To help out.
And you get a chance to make that classic. And as you said, as these matchups go, that classic become even bigger. So you're right. Depending on the matchup in that game, man, that could blow up. And now if that gets to 35 plus 40,000, it adds into that ESPN inventory talking about, which goes back to my case where Tennessee State really needs to start looking at what does this mean, not from them not necessarily being happy with the OVC, but in terms of the revenue generating capabilities of the SWAC. And what does this mean for them, as you're saying, maybe looking more at playing more MEAC teams, and hopefully that works for them in terms of attendance in the draw, which may not, which is the same reason we heard with the argument with FAMU in regards to what does that look like with travel, and will that classic game against a Morgan State or North Carolina Central or Norfolk State, will it resonate with the Tennessee State fans versus what would happen if they have those matchups regularly in a conference format with Alabama A&M, Jackson State, Southern, Florida A&M, and et cetera, Grambling State for that matter. It can start to get really interesting when you talk about that. So the conference churning, as you appropriately talked about earlier, who's to say it stops at 12? So it's going to be interesting for that fan work is people are talking about a super conference. I think it used to be 12 members as a super conference, but I think it's even a little larger than that because I think the average conference size is about 10, 11, or 12 right now. So I'm not sure if you can really put super conference on a 12 team. Now, branding is what they're talking about, a lot of people. So I can accept that from that perspective that we just alluded to the classic games, that it becomes very intriguing when you start talking about the business side of this, of what it looks like. And I think I'll throw this out here now for my colleagues. We need to do a special over the next week in terms of what this looks like from a scheduling perspective, where we can really look at various sports and who will be the team that goes over to the West Division. I really don't want to get into that now, but as a tease, that's something that we can start looking at because obviously the focus now is on Bethune-Cookman. What does this mean for the SWAC in regards to them becoming the 12th member, and then offsetting what does this mean for the MEAC? And to some degree, we have to start looking at, as we posed from the very beginning, you know, what does this necessarily mean for the CIAA? They just put out a statement of media release in terms of them rebranding themselves in terms of the core institutions and how they want to move forward of being more impactful on their legacy. And I think they're trying to put in position of, does this mean that maybe some MEAC schools will consider going down to the Division II or joining them? And I think a lot of this is proactive of trying to make sure that they keep those teams in regards to the CIAA. Because as I would put out there, if I was the MEAC tomorrow, and as Roy talked about, which makes sense to me, that there should have been aggressive meetings, if not face-to-face outdoor, at least backdoor conversations with Winston-Salem State, which would be a natural rivalry for North Carolina Central, which means maybe North Carolina Central says, not so fast, we don't necessarily have to move. We run it in basketball. Now we have a chance to really take a big step up in baseball. The problem is Winston-Salem State obviously dropped baseball, but maybe they decide to bring it back. And then you look at the fact that now they can run football. It puts them that much closer to looking at maybe they can replicate in a lot of ways what North Carolina A&T did in football and keep that $1 million money essentially for the Celebration Bowl. Then you move up a little bit and you talk about, can you look at Virginia State as a package with Winston-Salem State, which creates that natural rivalry again. So two public HBCUs, the largest ones in the state, with obviously Norfolk State. That keeps Norfolk State from having that wandering eye because you create that natural rivalry there. And obviously the final one that Roy put out there in regards to Bowie State and Morgan State. And that what could be a natural rivalry. So if you can get those three teams to come in, you go from 6 to 9 institutions back to an 8 conference. You have your basketball schools. You're in a really solid position for the MEAC to move forward, rebrand itself with rivalry games that are fully flux, and what that does for maintaining the MEAC SWAC Challenge and the Celebration Bowl. So I think that's a key target when you talk about what are the institutions that could go that would be natural cultural fits. But the question is, can you put a strong enough package in regards to the MEAC that help them with that move in regards to the costs associated with moving from Division II? So we also need to look at this from the CIAA again in regards to, will they become on the offensive or what looks in, and then therefore, to some degree, what does this look like for the SIAC in regards to them looking at maybe South Carolina State, who's still in that move in terms of them making some decisions. Do they want to maintain that Division I FCS status and with the MEAC, or do they start looking at their options in regards to what they're going to do?
Bryan, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add is that, Doc was talking about a 9-game schedule, and AD was talking even potentially of moving the Classic. We've seen classic rivalry games and conference expansion be adjusted because of one thing: television and money. So if there's anything that's going to come along and potentially move for Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M, that Florida Classic, it'll be television. And what a television may dictate in that money. And just think about this in a 9-game setting. Like right now, Bethune-Cookman ends their season with the Florida Classic, as does Florida A&M. And then, of course, very many SWAC teams do as well. I mean, obviously, Grambling and Southern in the following week. Well, if you move to a 9-game schedule, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have potentially more teams playing that last week during that same time as possibly Grambling and Southern. Or, this just came out as, this came out today, I heard. 3 of the Power 5 conferences were discussing the potential of moving their championship games a week back. So if you think about that potentially happening, whereas, championship games, instead of being the first weekend in December, move to the second week in December, which I think the SWAC doesn't, the SWAC already does that, if I'm not mistaken.
No, the first weekend. SWAC is the first weekend in December.
Okay, so the first
weekend, and then usually the Celebration Bowl is the third weekend in December.
Okay, so but just think about here, and I'm talking strictly in the eyes of television. If that happens to move, and you go to a 9-game schedule, you got to put these games in somewhere. If you're playing a 9-game conference slate in 11 or 12 weeks, or if you catch one of those years where people can play 12. You can play 12 games in a 14-week window. I mean, you're going to have to make some adjustments. So I think very soon, very soon you could be looking at the end of the Florida Classic being the end of the season for Bethune-Cookman and FAMU. I think it's very likely, and AD, your idea of possibly moving, I don't know what that would look like, but let's just say if television package comes in and money comes in and says, hey, we want to play your Turkey Day Classic game on Thursday, and then we want the Florida Classic on Friday, and then we want the Bayou on Saturday. Guess what's going to happen? That's going to happen.
Friday, Saturday.
That's because money will come in and dictate that, hey, this is going to be a part of our new TV package with whomever, assuming it's somebody big enough that can push that kind of move. And then all of a sudden, you got some adjustments. So, I mean, don't get tied down to the traditional schedule as it currently is, because I think it could change.
Well, let me say something on that, because I think this is where the variables come in for that, though. I don't know how that still being a conference game is going to impact what happens, but you have to remember, FAMU and Bethune-Cookman own that game, and so that means that
they own the consulting part of it. But once you join a conference, The conference owns the rights to the game. That is very important for us to understand. The conference owns the rights to that game. And let's be frank with this in regards to that. A lot of this will have to do in regards to the commissioner sitting down with these presidents, ADs first and VPs of athletics, and talking about the proposal. I'll give you a clear example of where that took place. In the SEC, they have what you call first rights. The first rights went to CBS. Mm-hmm. Then they had what you call secondary rights. The secondary rights went to ESPN. They even had what you call tertiary rights, which are your third rights, obviously. And those third rights originally went back to the institution. Those institutions, before there was an SEC network, could either do their own thing with their streaming platforms that were just coming on board, or they would create their own institutional network, or what you saw a lot is they would sign out with regional deals. Raycom Sports, some of y'all might have remembered them, right?
Jefferson Pilot back in the day.
Jefferson Pilot is another one, very good in terms of what that looks like. What the SEC did is they found out that they had a partner in ESPN that said we had a very good interest in regards to what we believe the value of your television deal would be. So we would like you all to consider about having this SEC network. What the SEC did is they ran the numbers and they said the numbers are off the roof. They said we can return essentially probably another $8 to $10 million to our institutions if we get all these tertiary rights and sell them to ESPN for a network. So all the school presidents were like, oh yeah, that's a no-brainer. If you can get something like that, yeah. So what the conference did is they went and looked at all the times that the contracts were going to expand and made sure all schools understood, do not enter into any new contract. They actually closed those contracts, and it got so big that they actually bought the rights back from Jefferson Pilot and Raycom. The bill was going to be that big that they bought the rights back, went to all their rights, their tertiary rights, and said, all right, the conference owns these rights now. Thank you, institutions, and we're going to make sure that you pay to answer for them. And they went to the SEC. They went to ESPN and said, y'all said y'all want to talk. Here we are. So they put all the Olympic sports on there. They put some of their football games on there, put a lot of their basketball games on there, including the non-conference game. And they had enough inventory for the SEC network, and they took hands over fist amount of money. Now, obviously, the money may not be and will not be as big as the SEC, but if you can even get anywhere close in regards to tripling or quadrupling what you got in your current ESPN contract, the money that FAMU and Bethune-Cookman would return from the conference, the SWAC, would dictate that it would make sense what Bryan just said, that we're going to make so much money that I can tell my fans that even if we have a small reduction of attendance by 5,000 or 7,000 fans, the money offsets any loss of potential fan loss. And I don't think that that's going to happen because now everybody's even more energized in regards to what you alluded to earlier. What if this becomes the de facto semifinal championship game? Oh man, that game's going to be off the roof, even if it is on television. So the framework of how we see games now has to change from a fan base. That this is serious at the time that the commissioner of the SWAC, Dr. Charles McClelland, and I've had the privilege to kind of work with him in some type of consulting framework, that I know that he's thinking about it. Now, how far he will decide to push forward, I know that this is things that he has is extremely aware of and is looking to capitalize. And one of the reasons that they were in a position to say yes to these two institutions in terms of the big picture of where the Southwestern Athletic Conference is heading and wants to go.
I don't like using the term, but let's play a little bit of devil's advocate, as we know that, again, part of the conversation has been the SWAC becoming a super conference. Like I said, I honestly believe that this This can help the MEAC as well to strengthen themselves where they are. But let's focus on the SWAC. Right now, we're at 12 schools. Say we want to get, let's just do 14. Let's not go to 16 route yet to be the super.
Can I enjoy 12? I haven't even had a chance to enjoy 12. If you want to go 14.
I hope you had less fun with 11, Brian, because it was only there for
who are the two schools that you look for? Who are you?
You didn't have time to get drunk off 11 before you got to 12.
We don't worry about that. But who to move to the next level, to move to that 14 schools? Who do you look at to make those moves? What schools do you think fit the footprint? Give the best.
13 is obvious, Roy. 13 is obvious.
Yeah,
question is number 14.
So I'm assuming your 13th team is Tennessee State.
Yes.
Correct. I think everybody is in consensus.
I don't think we get anywhere close to moving to 14 if Tennessee State is not ready to become the 13th. There's no way I'm going to 14 if Tennessee State is not ready and willing to go to 13.
Really?
Yeah, I think the key program in here is the Tennessee State. And the reason is because they can make the move as Division I. I'm not sure you're going to make a commitment to your Division II programs in terms of them moving up over a 4-year period of time. You would do that to get to 14 once Tennessee State, if they say, yes, there's too much momentum going here, we need to be a part of this. Then I start thinking you start looking at that. But before that, I don't think you go to 2 Division II teams and say, hey, y'all want to come together. Now, if you get some presidents over there and they can make the argument, I think you have to look at it if you're the SWAC. But I think the 13th member, which flips it to 14, will only take place if Tennessee State decides that, hey, we do not want to be left out of this. Outside of that, I think the SWAC is going to be fine with 12. And what, again, to me, what's interesting, again, is I harping on Tennessee State because they're variable out there. The other thing that makes it challenging in terms of when they make their decision is what do you do in regards to the television deal? If this television deal is negotiated before they decide to get on board, does bring Tennessee State allow the conference to go back to the table with ESPN, or do they have enough value to increase the revenue? Because one thing is key, as you expand the conference, you want to expand the conference by teams that equal, if not better, the divided distribution between the current team, right? So if you have 12 teams and you have a $12 million budget or $1,200,000, right? Make it easy in terms of the math and more realistic. You divide that by 12, each team gets $1 billion. When you go to 13, if Tennessee State or any institution for that matter can't increase that volume by $1 million, it's not worth it for the conference to let you in. You're actually losing money with you coming in terms of what the payout is to each conference. So these are what we look at in regards to when I'm teaching my students at Texas Southern University in the sport management program at the BS level, at the master's level, sports studies and sports leadership. Brian, that's a pool for you to consider us in terms of our online program. We'll put that out there so we can speak in existence. We'd love to have you in there, and anybody else out there for that matter in regards to that program. These are the things that we look at because we have a specific interest within our program where we focus on HBCU culture, sports, the athletic aesthetics, if you would, the sporting HBCU diaspora. We actually have a class within that program that looks at the uniqueness of HBCUs from a business perspective, and no other program in this country does that. So those that have a real interest in terms of sport management, sport leadership, athletic administration, particularly from an HBCU perspective, Texas Southern is doing it, and nobody else in this country can stay there. And so I bring all that point up to look at it, that it becomes even more strategic for us now on the media side to look at this, not just from a cultural perspective, which is extremely important what it means, But what does this mean from a business perspective of the Southwestern Athletic Conference? And what does it mean from the MEAC in terms of the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, more specifically? What do these financial components bring to the table, and why they're going to make their decisions moving forward in terms of how they look at things? And for that matter, what does this mean for North Carolina A&T? Did they make their decision almost too early? Now they're in the Big South in regards to this. There's been those little things coming out. Does the SWAC get to the point where they can even make a significant push to be at FBS, which is something that North Carolina's A&T has been open about? Have they put themselves in a position where they can't take advantage of it because the Sun Belt is not ready to expand, and the SWAC does get to an FBS level now that North Carolina is on the outside looking in? So I'm saying there's pros and cons to this in all the ways, and all these chips and people are trying to make these moves, but just because you make a move early doesn't mean that you made the best move.
Yeah. Brian,
Doc, can I ask you a question?
A message from the MEAC. Let's get that statement from the MEAC, Brian.
Go ahead and let AD finish his point, and I'll read that statement.
All right,
while it's still in his mind.
Quick question. Yeah, my mind is a little short, man. You went to that party when I was at FAMU. I graduated from 2 HBCUs, so you can pick one that I partied at.
Oh, I understand. I did the same, so I'm not going to look down at you. Like Southern Prairie View, we got it going on too, so we're on the same page.
There you go. Does the SWAC look even further east and look into the Carolinas, but not at A&T, but at Central as their possible 14th member to complement Tennessee State? I'll throw that one at you, Doc, since you are a SWAC aficionado.
Right, and I'm gonna tease out this a little bit so we can get to Brian, because we need to hear this statement from the MEAC. But yes, if Tennessee comes on forward, in regards to how I look at this in terms of television market, if I got to consult with the Commissioner Dr. Charles McClelland, he's much smarter than I am in regards to this. You've seen what he's done with Florida A&M landing that big fish, and now Bethune-Cookman. So do not want to take credit away from that. But I would say strategically, the institution that I said that really fits in a really good way in a lot of different things, and it's probably going to surprise a lot of people, is Clark Atlanta University. And let me tell you the reasons why. Clark Atlanta University is a private institution, so it gives a private partnership with Bethune-Cookman. You want to make sure there's some balance between your public institutions and your private institutions. So this gives somebody to go to the table with Bethune-Cookman when they're talking about, hey, these are some things we look at as a private institution, and for the 10 public institutions to consider that as they move forward. And in this case, obviously, that would actually be moving them up to 12. And so when you look at that perspective, the other thing that people don't realize about Clark Atlanta University, when you're talking about their enrollment, they fit the overall enrollment in terms of a lot of the institutions with 4,000 plus students and growing. They have a robust graduate program, academic side. People don't realize that there are only 3 institutions, HBCU institutions, that are doctoral research institutions that are private HBCU. One of them, most people would guess pretty quickly, Howard University. Oh. The second one, people may consider Hampton University. You know what the third one is? I just told you, Clark Atlanta University. So from an academic perspective, it gives you this. But really where I put all my chips on the table when you talk about it, it gives you the Mecca. It gives you the Atlanta market. And we're just talking about television. The television associated with getting in Atlanta really is nice. Now, this means you can book in the conference between 2 of the largest metropolitan cities in the Southwest and Southeast. You have Dallas with the St. Clair Classic, and now you got Houston with Texas Southern and Prairie View, essentially. And then you have Clark Atlanta and Atlanta with FAMU having a great footprint there, Tennessee State having a great footprint there, and Alabama State just outside of driving distance. So now you have these 2 meccas where you book in the conference. Let's say you have your football championship now because your television dictates it's in Houston, and you have your basketball championship in Atlanta. right behind after playing your Celebration Bowl in Atlanta. Think about what you're talking about from a television perspective and what somebody like ESPN or even Fox Sports Now looks at, or CBS Sports looks at in terms of, wow, in terms of this demographic and what it does, we need to seriously look at it, because this is an entry gateway to almost the whole African-American market throughout the South, not to mention those graduates that go across the country moving forward. So it is a whole different perspective when you start talking about expansion from that perspective, not just the culturally rich and programs that have good football or basketball programs. Look at it a little broader than it. And then once you get the commitment, and Clark Atlanta understands this, now you're talking about them being able to market their program at the SWAC level in FBS, and the money associated with what they put in, they easily get back. You talk about an institution that will explode in terms of their enrollment, because everybody says, this is not the same old Clark Atlanta that my parents went to. No disrespect to them when you look back at Atlanta University and Clark College, because those schools did a lot of great things as they merged into Clark Atlanta University. But you're looking at Clark Atlanta from a whole different perspective now when they're joining up with the Southwestern Athletic Conference, and at that time would be 10 public institutions to 2 private institutions covering the whole Southwest, from Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Wow.
Touching everything. Bryan, let's get that letter.
Okay, so I'll read this statement, and then I actually wanted to, before I read this statement, I wanted to add, to that thought, AD, you bring up North Carolina Central, and I'll tell you, if you had to compare and contrast why North Carolina Central or why Clark, why, like Doc mentioned, great arguments, I don't think the thing that makes Bethune-Cookman such a nice fit right now in the SWAC is, in terms of football, they have played, and I just kind of went back earlier and did the look at the schedule. They have gotten comfortable, or they have become familiar with the SWAC and SWAC opponents. SWAC opponents have become familiar with them. Going back to 2011, these are the teams that they have played from the SWAC. 2011, Prairie View A&M. 2012, Alabama State. No team in 13. In 14 and 15, they played Grambling. In 2016, they played Alcorn State. Did not play anyone in 17. The last 2 years, they played Mississippi Valley State. Actually, and last year, they played Jackson State as well. This year, they were scheduled, or are scheduled, to play Arkansas Pine Bluff. Name it, North Carolina A&T, North Carolina Central, they have done nothing to go out and, obviously, we've seen A&T play some SWAC teams at the end of the season, but in terms of scheduling, kudos to, Bethune-Cookman for going out and scheduling SWAC teams. And so when they come into the conference, there's already some familiarity with them. That's what I think is missing from somebody like a North Carolina Central or South Carolina State even, or maybe less South Carolina State, because I know they played a few SWAC schools. But, if you're going to go with two theories, I love Doc's theories out of the box, definitely, but it does make a lot of sense. So here,
the SWAC needs to let Central come in, because that's the only team that they've beaten in the Celebration Bowl. But I'll digress. Back to you, Bryan.
Wow. And actually, I think you'd be incorrect in that. I think Central lost that game. Oh yeah, you said that. So I guess it was they beat. I got you. Yeah.
Yes.
My bad. Okay, so this was released as an hour ago from the Media Athletic Conference. The MEAC statement on Bethune-Cookman University. The Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference acknowledges that Bethune-Cookman University has decided to leave the conference after June 30th, 2021, but is also determined to continue its mission of being a viable NCAA Division I conference. With 8 remaining full members, including 6 institutions that sponsor football championship, subdivision, level football, the MEAC will retain its NCAA automatic qualification in 9 sponsored sports. Bethune-Cookman will be leaving after 40 years in the MEAC. However, institutions make decisions based upon what they consider is in their best interest. As with many challenges intercollegiate athletics face, it also provides opportunities for new conference expansion. The MEAC is celebrating its 50th anniversary in 2020-21, highlighting a proud history and legacy, including NFL and NBA Hall of Famers, as well as Olympic medalists. The MEAC has been a transformative and dynamic conference in its nearly 50 years, and we look forward to an even brighter future. So I think they may have answered the one question that a lot of people had as to whether they would still hold on to their automatic qualifier in the NCAA in 9 sponsored sports. So no comment from Commissioner Dennis Thomas in this release.
Well, again, like I said, I personally think that this is really an opportunity. It's an opportunity for the MEAC to again strengthen itself, but not just the MEAC. I think this is a transformative time for HBCU sports in general. And I think that, and I really hope that as they make these moves, that our conferences come together and start having some really, I don't even want to say hard discussions, because let's get real. Especially when you start, let's start off with just the two revenue generators, football and basketball. When you look at the college sports landscape, once you go past the Power 5 conferences, where is the only setup that is designed, that is ready, and that is capable of being profitable? It is the HBCU sports market. Because most of these other schools who are at the FCS level, who are at the Division II level, do not have the history and tradition. And Doc, this is, you know what, we may need to find out. We may need to get a whole bunch of people in your class. And so what we're going to need to do is I need you to put together a commercial to talk about that. No, and I'm serious, because I don't think most people, and Brian, it's ironic that we're having this discussion today. I had a memory pop up on Facebook from last year when we did our Black college sports to the 21st century conversation, when we were talking about the exact same thing, about the people who have the ability to make money. And when you look at the sports that you have, you're already, let me explain the difference in this. And this is what people, because yes, Brian is fussing at me about it for years. He knows I am a purist.
Right.
What's up?
How about you tease it and we go ahead and take that break?
Well, if you got to drop off, though, we go stay here. If you need to leave, you go ahead and leave. So we'll bring somebody else in. We don't have to take a break because we're Doc. Me and Doc both are working the phones. We try to get some other folks in here in the thing. So, but
and I'm about to go jump on another one.
Andy, we know that you got to get out. You're gonna go. You said you're going to go talk to some other folks, so if you need to go ahead and do that, go ahead and jump out. We appreciate your time. Do you have any last comments you want to make?
What's the day, fellas? Today is June
25th.
June 25th. Hey, we still got 5 days left of the month, guys. There are other rumors out there. There may be some other stuff that come out in these last 5 days. I'm just going to leave it at that because everybody has to make their decision these next 5 days. I'm just going to put it out there. We may be seeing a lot of each other over the next couple of days.
Let's say thanks to AD Drew as he jumps off to go jump in with some other folks who are talking HBCU sports. We're going to continue our conversation. And I want to bring this to this, man, but this is the legitimacy and the basic reality of HBCU sports. We've got Michael Coker coming in. Doc, I'll let you introduce him in a second. So we'll get him in as the brother comes in. So we'll give him a minute to come in. I think we're trying to get his stuff get going. But let's be realistic. The beauty of HBCU sports is it doesn't matter who or what division you move somebody to or what happens. When you start playing another HBCU, when Bethune-Cookman starts playing Alabama State on a regular basis, guess what's going to happen? It is going to be excitement. The fan bases are going to go at each other. They're going to get engaged. They're going to jaw jack at each other. They're going to have fun. If Bethune-Cookman had jumped into the ASUN and played, look, we'll give the best of whoever they talk about. If they had jumped in and started playing Kennesaw State, the Wildcats are going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not really worried about that game. The HBCU product has the best built-in rivalry system of any Division I FCS or Division II schools. And that is just the fact, because ultimately we have to realize that this thing, football and basketball, are about making money. And if you want to look at how your games are going to go, what type of revenue generators you're going to get, the HBCU market needs to stand together and realize the power and the potential that they have across the board. And I'm talking about to the point where the MEAC and the SWAC are scheduling down to play the SIAC and the CIAA and building some things. Where the MEAC and the SWAC do a week, and the MEAC and the SWAC, the SIAC and the CIAA do cross-conference weeks, where that whole week all they're doing is playing the other set of HBCUs. These are the things that we can do that will build revenue for years to come. The classic model is who we are already. The bowls have started, all these other bowls that have popped off because of the fact that the HBCU classics were so profitable, and they cannot duplicate what we do. So I'm going to get off my high horse, and I'm going to let Doc introduce our guest and bring him in properly. So, Doc, go ahead.
Yes, this is AD and Bryan with the BCSN network. As we like to say, I'm a guest coming over from Dr. Bill's inside the HBCU SportsLab. Bringing on to us is a guru, and I mean this, Michael Coker, blackcollegenines.com. And for your baseball fans out there, man, it's really going to get excited in terms of baseball for the SWAC. It was already a major player that many people may not realize except for fans of the SWAC. But I'm sure Michael Coker is going to give you some great information of why it's just become even that more thrilling. And if you need to get your baseball fix in terms of just baseball in general, specifically for HBCU baseball, go check out blackcollegenines.com. I've had Michael Coker on as a guest in regards to what he brings to the table. And without further ado, I want Michael Coker to bring us a perspective that we probably just touched on, that he's really going to give you some great insight in terms of what does this mean for HBCU baseball.
Hello, everyone.
How you doing, Mike? Good to see you again.
It's always a pleasure to be back. And let me tell you something. This really changes the landscape of not just HBCU baseball, but Division I collegiate baseball as well. For HBCUs, because of the SWAC and the MEAC, the two conferences, they only took the champions, the conference champions from both leagues, from both conferences. This changes all of that. When you have two powerhouse programs, two good programs that are coming into the SWAC, you're still going to get those two teams. Those two teams that could finish, make the regional run. What it's going to do, it's going to open up, and it's going to get treated like the SEC, the ACC, the Power 5 conferences, the mid-conferences, where we could actually see 2 to 3, maybe 4 HBCU baseball programs make regional play. And here's why. When the MEAC it's safe to say it's being disbanded from within. You have two programs, Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M, that are now going to be SWAC members come 2021 season.
Yes.
Not only will it open up, because the RPI rating is what gets teams into regionals. When you have a rating percentage index, and that's what the NCAA looks at once they make their selections. You got some powerhouse programs within the SWAC. Now you have two really good teams coming from the MEAC that's joining the SWAC. That's going to force the NCAA to say that we have to include more than just the two conference champions, because now it's one conference. We're going to have to at least look at 2 to 3, maybe 4 additional teams, HBCU teams, that's going to make regional play. And what's that going to do? That's going to be a big revenue draw. Now you have Bethune coming in. Everybody knows that Bethune was a powerhouse, and they're a step away from regaining their steps. With FAMU, it also taps into the SEC getting those top baseball kids out of the state of Florida for recruitment. It's opening up avenues as to where kids can still be in the South and still play baseball at home, but in a better league with better travel, with better facilities, and it's opening up I think it's a big revenue draw for those HBCU programs within the conference, because now we just don't have two conferences, we have one. And the NCAA must honor that if you're going to have a regular season champion that's going to go to the regional, and you're going to have a conference champion with teams that have a winning record and have been having a great season or a good, decent season with a non-conference schedule. This is huge as far as the perspective for HBCU baseball. Never in the history have we sent more than just 2 teams. And that was because of the conference alignment. Now that the question needs to be, how are they going to align each division? Where will Bethune-Cookman go? Will it still have that rivalry in the East versus the West with FAMU? Just in terms of how the schedule will be played out once they become full SWAC members, it's going to be huge come regional time, because we're going to get 3 to 4 teams from that conference.
Man,
Michael, let me ask.
I told you were gonna get it, Bryan.
Yeah, no. Hey, look, I got a question, because I've seen conflicting statements regarding whether the MEAC will get that automatic qualifier in baseball. That you just hinted about them potentially get an automatic qualifier. Now, our guy Brian Simpkins had sent out a tweet that had. He felt that if conference, he said something that conferences need at least 6 or 7 members to earn the NCAA auto bid. With Bethune-Cookman leaving and FAMU, that leaves the MEAC with Delaware State, Coppin State, UMES, Norfolk State, and North Carolina Central. Only 5 schools in the MEAC. Is that still accurate?
Yes, but there's also talk that Delaware could be moving as well. And if Delaware moves in, you have right now you have to have your attention on the SWAC, because the SWAC has more than enough teams that could make some noise for the regional. In my opinion, I don't think that the MEAC will be around a year from now, and that's my opinion, and that's the landscape that I'm seeing.
It's a very popular opinion, so don't feel like you're out on an island there. It's it seems there's a lot. If you look on Twitter, there's a lot of people saying that very same with that same thought. So you think that there's a potential with strong programs. Obviously when we were on our show, we talked about Alabama State. We know what they have. Bethune-Cookman, FAMU,
Jackson State. 3. You have Jackson State. You have Grambling. These teams and their recruiting, they're at the tip of the iceberg. And you look at the coach Omar Johnson from Jackson State. He has won in the last 14 of his 15 years coaching at JSU, at Jackson State. He has won more than 30 ball games. Now you have Vasquez at Alabama State. He's tipping that iceberg. He's getting there. So, and you look at the scheduling. When you schedule Division I, your RPI is based upon your strength of schedule. Now teams are going to be coming and gunning for the SWAC. SWAC gets good recruiting in, and they start winning some ball games, big-time games, like they have been. I mean, how many times have they upset LSU, Mississippi State? I mean, these powerhouse programs. This changes the landscape. This gives us a huge advantage as to where the SWAC can become a powerhouse baseball program, a powerhouse conference.
What regionals might they be? You know, this is really projecting, so you know, I know this could go anywhere, but obviously outside of your winning conference team, do you think that in terms of placement for the SWAC, let's just say the SWAC gets one or two at-larges, so that second and third team, do you think they would stay somewhere in the southeast, or do you think they might put them in a regional somewhere in the Midwest, or it could be anywhere? I don't know how it's determined. I don't know if it's RPI driven or some other metric, but what might that, you know, look like if you could guesstimate?
Well, let's be fair about it. Alabama State about 4 years ago played Florida State. They opened up in the Florida State Regional, and that's really the Southeast. So with that being said, there is really no limit, and it's based upon your strength of schedule and your won and loss record against your strength of schedule. To go outside of HBCU, if you remember, Michigan ended up in California, and they won that, and at the last World Series came back and played in the World Series last year. So it's not really, the NCAA doesn't really take precedence or preference on keeping teams home. It's based upon your won and loss. Are you able to travel? Are you able to spend time on the road? And that's what it boils down to. Does your program have the revenue? And those are the simple things. And to me, this is be a huge revenue draw for the conference as far as HBCU baseball.
I want to follow up with a question in regards to, from a perspective of conference matchups and divisional alignments. What would you say would something that the SWAC should look at in terms of how you think they may look at baseball, particularly from a divisional platform, or should be a perspective where they play all types of games and then they just rotate certain teams on everybody's schedule? Do you think they should go to a divisional alignment, or should they just play a full schedule with some teams rotating off, or 8 teams, if you would, with 3-game series sets on weekends or something like that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, their current format is based upon their division. You have the East and the West division. I think that they should be combined. It would sit better if teams were to play each other instead of having the East versus the West, and then you come tournament time, it would be based upon seeding, your won and loss record in the conference versus your non-conference, because non-conference just gets you nowhere when it comes to conference play. So I think it would be in the best interest of the SWAC that once this takes place, that they throw out the division and put the teams, let each team play each other, and let the best 5-6 teams advance and have that opportunity to get regional play. Because to me, you're limiting them in who can get hot and who can't get hot, who can win it and who can't, by the division. You're still keeping that division format, but if you open up play, it's a good chance that it's going to draw more attention, and it's going to put the NCAA on notice that the SWAC is somebody that needs to be considered. It would be in their best interest. not just for the sport of baseball, but for revenue as well. Because right now I'm looking at revenue and recruiting. With those two teams, it opens up. Just, I don't know if people know this or not, but Florida is one of your hotbed for recruiting baseball talent. Everybody comes to Florida, with Texas and then Puerto Rico being third.
Wow. That's an interesting perspective. Let's dive a little more into that since you teased that out a little bit, talking about Puerto Rico. We obviously know a lot about Bethune-Cookman recruiting in Puerto Rico, and we've seen a little bit of that with Alabama State. And Melendez moved over from Bethune-Cookman to Alabama State, and then his assistant took over the job. Do you see that maybe having even more influx with more Puerto Rican players throughout the SWAC? Obviously, we've seen that. One player that played for a couple of years with Texas Southern. We've seen that obviously with Southern, but maybe even more so with that. And then with Jackson State, they got a player out of Carousel who was a big-time player in terms of their little league. So do you see not only Puerto Rico, but Caribbean baseball, how with the inclusion of the Florida baseball teams, does that become more of an open market to look at those players considering playing in the Southwestern Athletic Conference now?
Yes, but let's keep the facts where the facts are. Mm-hmm. When Melendez was the head coach at Bethune-Cookman, he recruited heavily out of Puerto Rico. Then he moves on to Alabama State. Alabama State basically gets first crack at all of those kids coming out of Puerto Rico. I don't care what Division I other schools, they look at Alabama State because they're heavily populated with, their coaches are from Puerto Rico. But also you have to add Alcorn State heavily recruits from Puerto Rico. So does Grambling, so does Coach Cooper. So does Omar Johnson. I can give you a list of coaches that heavily recruit out of Puerto Rico. They're getting the cream of the crop. But the cream of the crop actually goes to Alabama State. If Miami wants to, the kids have already made up their mind. Let's say Miami, Michigan, or the Florida Gators. Those kids aren't, it's a plus if they get a kid, but they really want to come to an HBCU. It's more than just from, this is what I found out. And I found this out about 7-8 years ago from a lady scout in Puerto Rico. She said to me that they tend to tell their kids, you will have a better education, you will have a better learning experience at an HBCU. So I put it back at her and I asked her why. And it's true. At HBCUs, we don't have proctors. We don't have 300 students in a classroom. At HBCUs, you get hands-on experience and you actually get an education. And a lot of these kids are coming from, I'm not going to say poor families, but they don't have the necessary resources. So their parents depend on their kids to get a better education for themselves, from the education that they couldn't get. So these kids, they study hard. Some of them can barely speak the language, the English. But when they get that opportunity, they make the best of it. And where do they do that? At HBCUs.
Great point. Bryan, before I turn the floor over to Michael Coker for any final comments you may have, is there another question that you want to jump in here and add?
I was just going to ask about the scheduling that, Michael, you were talking about. Instead of the East-West through the entire, sort of playing an entire conference schedule, I noticed, the MEAC has always done the traditional 3-game series, and I will confess that I don't know, if the SWAC does a similar setup in their conference, but I'm familiar that most colleges do. What do you think the format of games might look like if everybody is playing everybody?
The same. You're going to have the same weekend 3-game series, and then your midweek games, that's your out-of-conference games. That's not going to change. That's going to remain the same.
Makes sense there. Again, this is Dr. Kenyatta Cavil with Bryan and AD on the BCSN show. We're coming in, Dr. Mills, inside the HBCU SportsLab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop as a guest. And we have the floor with Michael Coker, that is a special guest from BlackCollegeNines.com. Again, for those baseball fans out there, you can't get better information than going to BlackCollegeNines.com. And as you see with the information here, you can't get this in-depth type of knowledge anywhere else. With that, Michael Coker, know you have a busy schedule, but certainly thank you for joining us. Wanted to give you the final say, floor, if there's anything that we may not have asked that you think our followers need to know in regards to HBCU baseball and BlackCollegeNines.com.
Well, I'm hoping to see hopefully Coppin State and at least Norfolk State. If the SWAC can woo those two teams there, we'll have a Power 5 conference. I really feel that way. North Carolina A&T has already accepted an invitation to I forget the name of that conference. Yes, the Big South. Right. And if they can get two more teams, I think Coppin, it would be in Coppin's and Norfolk State's best interest. I think North Carolina Central is either going to go independent, and these are my thoughts because I thought about this today. I think North Carolina Central can either join the Big South or go independent. And Delaware State, that's kind of up in the air, but they're talking about leaving as well. I saw information on that. But I think that the two key additions that would really boost the SWAC would be Coppin State and Norfolk State, two heavy baseball programs. That if the SWAC, it's obvious they're not looking at the regionals because grabbing it makes sense to grab Florida A&M. You know, Bethune is 3-4 hour drive from there, so that makes sense. But going up north and getting those two northern teams to play in a SWAC, that's huge. That's big. That would give the conference enough teams as to where you could actually have 4 regional teams. I mean, what it comes down to is you don't even have to win a tournament. You could go into the tournament, win a game, lose the game, get put out of the conference tournament, and still, because of your RPI and because of your ranking, you still can get a regional announcement. It would be no different than what they do to the ACC, the Pac-10, the Big 12, the Pac-12, and all of the other conferences. Why not the SWAC?
Thank you, boy. I tell you, there's a lot to think about and consider and fodder, and we certainly will continue to talk about now Bethune-Cookman becoming the 12th member of the Southwestern Athletic Conference, joining FAMU in 2021 for a 12-member Southwestern Athletic Conference that will have great football, great basketball, and as you just heard, great baseball. We haven't even talked about the women's sports. So look out. They're very competitive as well. So volleyball takes a notch going in another direction. Women's basketball, for those that follow the SWAC, know it's second to none in regards to the competitiveness there. That just got better. Softball, as we take the other side of baseball, extremely competitive. You know the history if you're an HBCU fan in regards to Bethune-Cookman, they'll run to a super regional in softball and what they have been able to do. So it will be fascinating to cover. As media pundits, we're so excited about it. With that, again, Michael Coker of BlackCollegeNines.com. I want to say thank you for your time. I'll shift back over Ryan as we start to close out on the show, as we have some other things, and I think Roy wants to jump in here and say something as well.
Before we, Mr. Coker, we want to thank you for your time. Before we close out the show, though, we've actually got Dr. Charles McClelland, the SWAC Commissioner, is jumping in now. You'll see him pop up here on the screen in just a second. So, Mr. Coker, thank you. You can hang around if you like, but there he is, Dr. McClelland. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Thank you, Mike.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on board.
All right, Dr. McClelland, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. I see you got your SWAC shirt on.
Oh, yes, sir. You saw that, didn't you? Hey.
You know, I snuck him a shirt down there, Charles.
Dr. McClelland, I need some gear. I need some gear. I'm the only one without SWAC gear. I feel left out of the party here, sir.
Well, we're going to make sure you're taken care of. You got that Adidas on. We're SWAC schools. I mean, the Nike school. So.
I know. I'm all kinds of messed up today.
Nike conference.
So
yes, sir.
We're going to jump right into this and give you the opportunity to take the floor. Tell us what your thoughts are about having Bethune-Cookman University join the SWAC and what this impact, again, does to the job you're doing over there at the SWAC.
Well, we're excited, obviously, to have Bethune to join the Southwestern Athletic Conference. What they bring to us is definitely a huge benefit. You're talking about a school in the MEAC that has a tremendous athletic performance resume. You're talking about a strong football team. You're talking about an extremely strong baseball team, strong track team, strong golf team. I mean, what they're going to do to the Southwestern Athletic Conference overall, not just in the sport of football. Can you imagine what our baseball tournaments are going to look like now? Now, their baseball team has just been, outstanding. So it's almost like, we are the conference that from a football's perspective, you got 12 strong, baseball, you got 12 strong, basketball, you got 12 strong. So what they brought to us just wasn't a football brand. They brought a strong program across the board. And also, they're very well funded. They're going to be in the top 3 funded programs within our conference. So it was a good fit for us. I know these are some of the questions that you're probably going to ask. I always see Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, and I could see his mind twirling over there. But, one of the things that we wanted to look at were there were a couple of things that we wanted to look at. One was the travel and the distance in between the schools. And I know that was a concern not only for the Florida schools, but it was a concern for the Pine Bluffs and the Texas Southerns and the Prairie Views. Well, what this does is it allows us to have true divisional play in Olympic sports. So everybody that's in a division that's east of the Mississippi, you don't have to go any farther than east of the Mississippi or to Florida, and anybody that's in a division that's west of the Mississippi River, you don't have to go any further west in the Mississippi River and no further east. So it's going to reduce travel because we'll have a true divisional play. When you start talking about football, we are still looking at the 8-game format. So you have 5 games in your division, and then you'll have 3 games in the cross division, which means that there are 3 teams that you don't play. So theoretically, when you look at the Texas teams, we can schedule to where you might go to Florida once every 4 years. You might go to Alabama once every 3 to 4 years. You say, how does that happen? Well, I play my 5 on the west, and let's say I can get Valley and Jackson State on the other side, and then I can choose between, the Alabama schools, the Florida schools, or Alcorn. And again, one of those will have to go to the west, and I know that's going to be another question. But we can rotate those to where we can limit Texas having to go to Florida, and we can limit Florida having to go to Texas. And we can also do the same thing with Arkansas. When you look at basketball, you're talking now 12 teams. As you know, the max is 20 from a conference slate. We want to make sure that our teams have the opportunity to get their game guarantees in. But at the same time, we don't want you now playing all of these NAIAs. That was actually one of the initiatives that we had. So now we've added 2 Division I schools that you can get a legitimate win or a legitimate loss from that will help the net rankings. So when you start talking about conference, you play home and away on your side. That's 10. And then you play everybody in the other division at least once, right? That's 15. And then you still can play home and away with 2 to 3 schools. What that does is it allows you to still maintain your rivalries. Nobody would have to give up a rivalry home game. Nobody would have to give up a rivalry home game in football. There's enough space for us to be able to do both from a football's perspective and a basketball perspective. So geographical footprint was strategic in our looking at Bethune to ensure that we can reduce travel and save money. When you draw a circle around the United States and you look at the Southwest, the Deep South, and the Southeast, from Texas to Florida, we have every major Division I athletics program, every Division I major band. I mean, we have now 4 of the top 5 attended football classics, with one of the 5 Jackson State participating in. We got a big stick to play with now, and I'm excited.
No doubt about it. As you open it up, I wanted to go and take a deeper dive in regards to that question. Obviously, with one of the teams in what was the 10-member SWAC, essentially in Mississippi, whether it's Mississippi Valley State or Jackson State or Alcorn State. I know you said that decision hasn't been made yet, but could you give us some insight in regards to how that decision will come about? You know, what are the frameworks of making that decision, and how will it be approved?
Well, it's going to go through the membership. It'll start with the coaches' committees. And again, we talked about this when we announced FAMU. Jennifer Williams, the athletic director at Alabama State, is going to lead this initiative for us. But I think we're going to have some fun with it. You know, as I sat down and thought about it, who goes to the Western Division? Let's do a fan poll. We're going to probably put something up on our website. We want to hear from the fans. Who do you think will be best to go to the West? There are going to be a couple of things that we're going to have as foundational items. One, we're not going to give up any rivalries, right? So whichever school goes, let's say, and you mentioned 3 schools in the state of Mississippi, they all play each other and they're all heated rivalries. Regardless of who goes, the model allows them to be able to play each other, both home and away, in football and in basketball, and quite frankly, if they choose to, in all other sports. Distance and travel will have a lot to do with it. And obviously, we want to throw in competitive equity when we start talking about it. But again, the competitive equity standpoint, in my opinion, is going to be subjective, because on any given day right now, in any given sport, we are a super conference right now. Let's make no mistake about it. I don't care what sport it is. We now have the top HBCUs and, quite frankly, some of the top teams in Division I. So I don't know how much the competitive equity is going to factor in with that group, because, you know, who's on top today might not necessarily be on who's on top tomorrow. So we're going to have fun with it. We're going to make sure that we take time, we plan, we're going to get feedback. And I think it's only fair for us to let the fans chime in, for them to tell us who they would like to see go to the Western Division.
Certainly. With that, I don't want to monopolize the time. So, Bryan, do you have a question that you want to get in?
Well, yeah, and you took one of my questions, so that was good. We get that one out of the way. Dr. McClelland, I'm curious about you mentioned going to an 8-game format. Many of the conferences, like in the SEC, Big Ten, I think even the Big 12, are playing 9-game schedules right now. I don't know if you said if it's already set in stone to play 8, but is there some consideration to possibly moving to a 9-game football schedule? And if so, would the thought of the Bayou Classic being the sort of end of the regular season still be on the table in that kind of format?
Well, answer your second question first. We're not going to touch the Bayou Classic. We're not going to touch the Labor Day Classic. We're not going to touch the Florida Classic. We're not going to touch any of those games. When you start talking about FBS, keep in mind FBS has 12 games that they play. FCS has 11. So their 9-game is actually within the same footprint that we have. They have 3 games that they can play outside of the conference. We're moving to an 8-game schedule this year. It's been highly debated. I'm not quite sure if adding 2 additional teams will allow us to go to 9. We still have to get game guarantees in. We have to have flexibility. And that's really been the, I guess, debate about 7-game, 8-game, 9-game. 8-game was kind of that middle of the road. It gives you 3 games to play your game guarantee, possibly bring in a game guarantee, and then go out and try to play a team at your level where you can make money. Well, I think we've already checked off the 3rd. We have so many teams in our conference. You just pick one of them, and then they can go and you can make money. I saw, and again, Vice President Robinson at Jackson State. A tremendous honor of him leading the FCS ADs. Again, as I said, they don't pick people that's not on the ball, that's not smart, that don't have things going for them. That's going to be a significant piece for us to be able to maneuver within this FCS foothold. We're strategically getting people in places where we can make significant change. But you look at what happened with Jackson State and Tennessee State, and then they can turn around and replace that game with a Florida A&M if they choose to. And I realize the Florida A&M didn't necessarily replace the Tennessee State game because the Langston game dropped off. But you lose Tennessee State on Monday and you pick up Florida A&M on Thursday. I'm happy to say, where else can you do that other than the Southwestern Athletic Conference? So fans are going to be extremely important. Rivalries are going to be extremely important, but we do want to give schools the flexibility to be able to check off all of those other boxes. But I preface that statement by saying we're strategically in the same position as those FBS schools because they have 12 games to play. We only have 11. They're giving their schools 3 games. We're giving ours 3 games.
So, Dr. McClelland, I think I want to jump in and ask a question, and it kind of falls in line with some of the things that you're talking about now. As I was on my rant earlier, and you've known me for a while, I am a purist, as we say, with the HBCU market, and what I believe that the brand of HBCU athletics the type of impact it can have across the board. What I'd like to know is, with what you all are doing with the SWAC now, do you think that we can get to a point very soon where our schools don't have to play these guaranteed games with the big Power 5 schools at this particular point, and that we can build from the HBCU level the opportunity where both schools can walk away with $600,000 for a game, and coming together and doing some different things? What is your thought process on the FCS schools focusing on building their brand as opposed to playing these FBS payout games?
Well, I think that's the goal. I think the goal is to add teams that are strategically aligned with who we are. And who we are, 42 of the last 43 years, we lead attendance. Bethune athletic ability comes in and adds another powerhouse. And you talking about revenue, we're going to be able to do some different things now. We're playing from a different position. We're now playing from a position of strength. So I know, and I'm on social media, I know there's a debate about the television contract, right? We have a television contract with ESPN. Do we go back to the table with it? Yes. But the television contract is going to be a significant piece of us not necessarily having to play those game guarantees. But when you go back to ESPN, now when you look at our brand, we're in a little bit different position from a negotiation standpoint. I also saw on social media where they talked about where you're adding all of these classes where the classic games, SWAC doesn't get money. Yes, we don't get money off of those classic games, but when they become a part of our portfolio, not only do we sell it from a television standpoint, but from a sponsorship standpoint. Our sponsors, the phone is ringing. I mean, I'm probably more excited about that than anything. We're fielding calls from sponsors saying, hey, we want to be a part of what the Southwestern Athletic Conference is doing. So the strength of our conference is based upon the strength of our member institutions. There's going to be more revenue. And again, I say this, I could have just coasted, Roy. We had 10 schools. We were doing well. Now the pressure is truly on the commissioner to go out and get these television deals done, get these sponsorship deals done, get all of these things that the fans have talked about. There is no excuse because we have every asset, we have every resource. But I would say this, if you want to play a game guarantee, we're going to give you room. But I would like for us to get to a point where we play them because we want to play them, not necessarily because we have to play them.
Okay.
Dr. Charles McClelland, this gives me a chance to do this plug. I'm a professor over at Texas Southern University. You were formerly the VP of Athletics at Texas Southern University, and before that, obviously, the athletic director at Prairie View University. I don't bring that up to talk about that side of it, but many people may not realize, as I talked about a little earlier in here, that we have a sport management program, a BS in sport management, and most recently a Master's of Science in Sports Studies and Sports Leadership. You taught in that program. at the Masters Global, and we've had opportunity to talk about the business side of sports. And I think now we're getting people to understand, moving from just a cultural component about the business side of that. And so I'm happy to say that you were part of that program from a teaching perspective. And people may know about the Dr. Charles McClelland, but they don't know that you had that expertise as well. Talk about the academic platform now that the Southwestern Athletic Conference puts together. You talked about this a week ago when FAMU came in and we're now having 3 law schools. I had a chance under your leadership to talk about the other programs in a lot of ways. Now with Bethune-Cookman, you add another nursing program, credited wise. But Bethune-Cookman in these degrees, talk about the academic side of what the Southwestern Athletic Conference now brings to the table and how that also can move the conference membership forward.
Well, first of all, let me put your business out on the street. Kenyatta has been a significant player in all that I've done, not only as a vice president at Texas Southern University, but even as commissioner. When it's time to do research, I turn to Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. There is nobody out there that is as knowledgeable as Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. When it's time for me to get some research, it's time for me to get some data, when it's time for me to get some historical perspective, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil is who we reach out to. So I'm putting you out there on full blast so everybody will know. My ability to be able to teach within that program, and I'll say this, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, you're going to have some heck of a lessons to talk about this fall and this spring semester, because you're really living, a historical moment within the Southwestern Athletic Conference. And there's a lot to be discussed and there's a lot to be studied about. So I really wanted to give you your kudos because, again, you have been a significant part of us being able to make the transition, not only the things we did at Texas Southern, but clearly within the Southwestern Athletic Conference. But we've talked about all of the parameters that Bethune and Florida A&M brings to the Southwestern Athletic Conference. Again, it's not just about the athletic ability. I don't want to not give credit where credit is due. Bethune-Cookman's band, again, is one of the best bands. It was a significant conversation about who do we bring in. When you look across the scope of who we are and who we want to bring in, the list was narrowed significantly, but bands were a part of that. If we're going to bring somebody in, they have to be as strong on the band side as they are on the athletic side. And yeah, quite frankly, they have to be as strong on the academic side. You're talking about Bethune-Cookman University. You mentioned the nursing program, but another engineering program, another world-renowned business program. I mean, whatever it is that you want to be, you can be it within the Southwestern Athletic Conference. So Bethune has, so many different dynamic programs. And I know I've seen people write, okay, they are a private institution. Yes, they are a private institution, but the academic mission is the exact same as the other 11-member institutions. The only difference between Bethune-Cookman and our other institutions is where they receive their money. And oh, by the way, they're now a part of the Florida legislature, so they are private, but they're starting to get some public money. So technically, they're no different. And by the way, they're coming in with a budget that's going to be top 3 within the Southwestern Athletic Conference. So strong academic programs makes us a strong conference. I can send my kids to any SWAC school, and they can get the same quality education. They can be whatever it is that they want to be. I don't care what it is that you want to be. You can be an aeronautical physicist that wants to go to the moon or Mars. You can get that degree, and you can become that person now within the Southwestern Athletic Conference. So academics is clearly something that we want to push. And ultimately, athletics is the window in which the world sees us. All of this is to bring our academic platform to the forefront. Bethune-Cookman checks that box.
Dr. McClelland, let me jump in. We've got a question from actually a Rattler who's tuning in and watching this, a gentleman named Michael Reed. He says, what does the SWAC championship game now have on the ability for the rest of the schools not playing in it to qualify for the FCS playoffs?
So the SWAC championship game obviously is 2 weeks after the beginning of the FCS playoffs. But all of our schools, except really 3, possibly 4, are already done. Their seasons are already completed. You have the Bayou Classic, which is the first week, and Alabama State normally has the Turkey Day Classic. Everybody else will be finished. So you will know if you are in the line for the SWAC championship game or you're in line to go to the FCS playoffs. Theoretically, there's a week that will separate. There could be a situation where, there's a tie if a team loses in the Bayou Classic, that you might miss the opportunity to go to the FCS playoffs. And unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about that. But you're going to have to qualify. And ultimately, what we've tried to do is strengthen our league to where you can qualify through our league. You don't have to go out and try to play all of these games that could possibly not help you. You can qualify and get your resume built within the Southwestern Athletic Conference. So what we've seen in the past is schools that possibly would qualify would have the ability to go. Those that were looking at the SWAC championship, they knew it, and they vested all of their energies into the SWAC championship game. So it's no different than what we're doing now. We just think that we'll have more schools with a larger, pool and a bigger ability to go to the FCS playoffs, given that we've added Bethune and Florida A&M. And I hope I answered your question.
I'm sure you did.
So,
Mike is one of those folks who is bent on going back to the FCS playoffs, and he is he's definitely an advocate for that. As he and I have had many arguments to the contrary from my different perspective, but we're fair and balanced here on the Black College Sports Network. So even those dissenting views, we like to give them their opportunity when having the chance to speak to folks like yourself. Brian, you got something you wanted to ask the commissioner?
Yeah, Dr. McClelland, I'm curious about, in terms of scheduling and the footprint of the SWAC, which now reaches into Florida. Are there any, and obviously we've seen from the schools such as the schools that have recently left the MEAC, I'll just say it like that. Is there any locations along the eastern coast or maybe even further west that you would like to see possibly the SWAC teams possibly schedule games or classics? Are there any, in terms of expanding the reach of the SWAC, are there any destinations that maybe in the back of your mind or unofficially that maybe, hey, I'd love for us to be able to showcase our conference and our teams in this city?
Well, we're wide open to play, Brian, but I would say we are now the show. So if you want to be a part of what we have, you might need to think about coming to play us. I would say this. We don't have any restrictions on who our teams play. And I think as we start to look at a scheduling model and a scheduling philosophy, we are going to give our schools the greatest level of opportunity to be able to go out and schedule. But quite frankly, we have the teams and we have the fans and we have the crowds. We're going to make sure that our schools are taken care of first before we actually go put our show on the road. And I know you didn't ask this question, but I can foresee that there are going to be a lot of scheduling issues. People come to Southwestern Athletic Conference football games, 42 of the last 43 years. You're adding 2 major name brands to it. That's only going to enhance our popularity. If there's an opportunity to play, I can see we wanting to play each other. Can you imagine if, and I'm not saying this happens, but let's just say Alcorn isn't on the schedule for FAMU. Does Alcorn opt to go to the East Coast and play somebody, or do you opt to play FAMU in a non-conference game? Your stands are going to be crowded. I can imagine that games such as non-conference games are going to start to shrink from some of those schools that have normally played Southwestern Athletic Conference teams. Not because we're saying that we don't want to play them, but the room to play those teams are going to start to reduce significantly because of the teams that we have and the fan bases that we have. We could actually be self-contained and play all of our games and still fulfill all of the boxes that need to be checked.
I had one final question I wanted to get in specifically in this interview, depending on your time. But that was to look at it. Oftentimes, obviously, we look at football. It's one of the big things as we talk about in the SWAC. The late, great Marino Cassim obviously came up with the phrase to really illustrate why that is the case. We touched a little bit on basketball and certainly baseball. But on the Title IX of things, when we look at what this additional expansion with FAMU and now, particularly even Bethune-Cookman, if you look at it, what does this do on the women's side in your mind for volleyball, which those two institutions have very strong programs? Obviously, the women's basketball becomes stronger. Nobody really needs to refocus on that. But even when you start talking about softball, in a lot of ways, track and field, on both sides, but specifically looking at Title IX, on the women's side, bringing the state of Florida to track. What are your thoughts in terms of what this does for women sports in the Southwestern Athletic Conference and how that arranges with your goals in terms of Title IX?
Yeah, we're balanced and loaded across the board, Dr. Cavil. That's not a Title IX answer, but our women's athletic programs are going to be just as exciting as our men's athletics program. We are a juggernaut right now. And when you talk about what Bethune and Florida A&M brings, they bring quality programs. And all of the social media chatter that I've seen from FAMU, they bring a lot of noise talking as well. And I know Bethune is going to bring the same thing. And that's what makes the Southwestern Athletic Conference so great. That back and forth, and then the ability to be able to go to the games. You don't have to wait for football season when football season ends to be able to engage in that banter. You immediately go to basketball, men and women. You immediately go to baseball and softball. You immediately go to track. You immediately go to golf. You immediately go to bowling. We are balanced across the board. And to expand on your question, again, from a standpoint, I received tons of emails when we brought FAMU in about who should have been the 12th member. We had people saying, go get NAIA schools, go get Division II schools. And quite frankly, we even had somebody say, go get Morehouse, and that goes to that Title IX. We could not bring in an all-male athletic program because it'll violate what we would have to do on the Title IX perspective. So whoever we bring in, we have to bring them in from a balanced standpoint. But let's take a step away from Title IX. Let's look at a Division II institution. One, it takes, and we talked about, a minimum of 4 years for them to transition to Division I. But can you imagine a Division II school having to, even if you're a powerhouse in football, coming to the SWAC and having to play? I think the maximum scholarships there is 35, 36. A 35, 36 scholarship football team is not going to be able to hold up to this day in and day out gauntlet of Southwestern Athletic Conference football. And you don't want to bring a member institution that they cannot compete football-wise, basketball-wise, softball-wise, track-wise. So whoever we got, they had to be able to fit. They had to be able to compete. They had to be able to bring that Title IX piece to it. And they had to be able to complete that circle. And as I said, our circle, it's complete, and we're getting ready to go do some great things.
Thank you for that.
So we actually have another question from one of our colleagues. A.D. Drew actually just asked the question, ask Dr. McClelland, will the basketball tournament expand from 8 to all 12 teams now?
That's a good question. I go back to, that's something that we're going to have to discuss. And I'll tell all of the listeners this. We just bought a brand new Ferrari. We don't even know what all of the gadgets are on. We don't know how fast it goes. We just know we have a Ferrari. We got to get in and read the owner's manual and figure out, how to drive this thing. That's the fun part. And we'll get together. And we have some modeling. We have some things that we have. But, you talk about basketball, and I'm really just talking now without putting anything on paper, discussing anybody. I'm thinking about baseball. How can you exclude some of the teams in baseball? Right now, we bring in the top 8, right? We just added 2 baseball teams that are significant. How do you do that? Do we go to the SEC model? Well, we play in. And all of that's going to be on me. Most of that is funding, right? It's not necessarily about being able to play. It's about money. We now have the ability to go out and generate money where we can assist schools to come, whether that's basketball, whether that's baseball, whether that's softball. My philosophy is I don't want finances to get in the way from our overall level of competitiveness. So we have some work to do, but I'm just excited about the Ferrari that we have. We just have to figure out how to drive it to the maximum ability.
Well, Bryan, I don't know if you have anything else that you want to say to Dr. McClelland, but I want to make a statement. Dr. McClelland, I have not said this, I don't think, to you in a public sense. I know I've had some conversations with you on the phone. I guess it's been about 2 years now since you've taken over the helm of the Southwestern Athletic Conference. When that news first broke, I tweeted, and this was one of the very few times that I actually did a physical tweet, and it wasn't just a copy of something that I did. And I posted on Instagram that Dr. Charles McClelland becoming the commissioner of the SWAC was going to be the best thing that has happened to HBCU sports in the past 50 years. I stand by that today.
Wow.
You are doing an amazing job. I am glad and I'm excited to watch the things that you're doing and the vision that you have coming to fruition. You said something to me years ago when I had an opportunity to speak to the SWAC commissioner or the SWAC athletic directors when we were first starting this project, when folks were looking at streaming and black folk were talking about streaming on the internet, and most people were looking at us like we were crazy. And you said something that stuck with me, but you are the light at the end of the tunnel for those of us who are HBCU purists, and what you're doing and making sure that we maintain the history of that. And I just want to first say thank you and continued success in what you're doing.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you having me on your show. I do have to go, but I would be remiss by saying it's not me, Roy. I mean, I have an outstanding staff. Jason Cable, Dina Pooler came with me from Texas Southern. She's a assistant AD, Andrew Roberts. And I had the first time really in my career, the ability to be able to bring in all of the individuals that I wanted to surround me. And I'm only as good as those individuals that are supporting me. And I have an outstanding staff. And when I say outstanding, I know I get the credit, but this is not even a cliche. They are the ones that are really making a lot of this happen. And then when you talk about our athletic director,
okay, yeah, we lost you there for a minute.
We have 10 outstanding athletic directors that are extremely supportive. We have 10 presidents that are all on the same page. So if you have all 10 presidents, all 10 athletic directors, and a conference office staff that's cohesive and on the same page, this is the reason why we've been able to move forward. I'm just fortunate enough to be the commissioner, but it's not me at all, Roy. It's everybody involved.
All right. Thank you, Dr. McClelland. We look forward to seeing how you guys are looking at new Ferrari.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you.
All righty.
Man, that was a great interview.
So we got AD coming back in, and we're gonna get ready to close this out. He said
what's AD want to talk about? What else is there to talk about today?
That's the commissioner. That's a drop the mic moment from my perspective. Just want to let folks know we were not able to get AD Thompson from Bethune in tonight. He is still in the middle of meetings, but please stay tuned to the Black College Sports Network, the BCSN SportsWrap, inside Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU SportsLab. If you haven't followed all three of those, get there, follow us. We will have him on tomorrow. We will put a post out letting you guys know what time that will air. And again, it will air, of course, here on Facebook on all three platforms, as well as on our Twitter feed. And we are just, we're just looking. I'm just excited, man. Like I said, as an HBCU purist, I'm so excited about what Dr. McClelland has happening over at the SWAC. And I'm going to tell people, man, I'm really interested in the MEAC call tomorrow. I am not one of those people who thinks this is all doom and gloom for the MEAC. I really honestly believe that this is an opportunity for the MEAC to return, almost like the $6 million man, stronger and better. Because they should have this opportunity to be able to create that regional base that you need for HBC or for college sports to be truly successful.
Well, Roy, if you think about what Dr. McClelland just said, and a lot of times, again, people are always quick to say, "Oh, so and so from Division II should come up should join the MEAC," and blah 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 blah. Well, one, it's a financial situation, and then two, as he mentioned in that interview, there's a transition period that happens. So, a lot of people out there just think it's, easy to just jump from Division II up to Division I. It's not that easy. And that's sort of the situation, and why, seeing how the MEAC responds to this news will be really interesting over the next year. Because there aren't very many independent. As I can think of, there's only one or two independent FCS schools, and then there are no HBCUs in Division I that are just without a home, or that. Like, why would Tennessee State leave? Everybody went to the SWAC. Hampton went to the Big South. Savannah State went down to Division II. A&T went to the Big South. There's nobody left. So unless they, I don't know. Like I said, it's a tough spot to be in, and it's a very challenging spot to be in for the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, and that'll be interesting.
One of the things
to see what happens.
One of the things that I have talked about, and I think this is something that needs to be really looked at, because we know that both Hampton and A&T, one of the key factors, or what was put out as the key factors of them leaving, was the ability or the travel expenses that were dealt with, that you had to deal with going down to Florida on a regular basis for your non-revenue generator sports. Again, as an HBCU purist, and I like to make that point clear to people. I don't make any bones about it. This is that time that I think, honestly, your A&T and your Hampton look back at the MEAC now and say, wait a minute, okay, you know what? That financial piece has changed. Let's look at this from a conference perspective and see what is it that we can do, like you said, that may be able to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. If we were to return back to the MEAC now and do those things and put that stuff back in place, and then make that move to add whoever the 1 or 2 more schools you might need to have come in there. I really hope that the A&T faithful and that the Hampton faithful talk to their administration, talk to their fan base about possibly now coming back to the MEAC and getting back engaged in that process. Because if it was truly about the travel expenses and the things that you were doing, you no longer have that as an issue. You are truly that regional area where you can, again, that 8-hour drive time, that's all you need. These schools, if you're within that 8 hours from a driving perspective, you completely change the dynamic of what your cost is, what the look and feel for your student athletes are as they're going through these things, and you can now have a seriously strong regional base that can change the MEAC in such a positive way.
You're an optimist. You're a dreamer. I get it, Roy. It's not happening. It's not happening. I'm sorry. It's not happening.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'd like to chime in on something, fellas, and I thank you all for pushing the accept button. Let me come back.
Because I was ready to go eat dinner tonight, AD, and then you come back. I'm ready to go eat dinner. So.
Y'all done killed my nap after work anyway, so you tried to sit here and suffer with me. But actually, I got this tweet during this conversation. This is from Third Coast Sports Head, and he tweeted out something, and Dr. Cavil may appreciate this. Just a thought. There's an FCS in Texas that starts this year and will be an independent that the Southland Conference should have invited, and they did invite them. That being Tarleton State. Maybe they fit within the footprint with the school being in Texas. Maybe there might be another possibility for number 14, as we talked about earlier today, to come in along with Tennessee State. And we know Dr. McClelland definitely is the type of person who would think outside the box, bringing in a non-HBCU into the conference to balance out the conference.
Nah, Roy doesn't like that. He's an HBCU purist. No one can be. Anyway, let me stop. Hey,
excuse me for saying it like this, but white folk money spend just like black folk money, Roy.
Yeah, and they don't travel like we do to our games when it comes to the other. But we won't get into that's a whole nother show because yes, all of us are hungry. So we're gonna get some last thoughts from Bryan and from Kenyatta and see what we got going on. Doc, let's let you go ahead and go first. Kenyatta, what you got to close out with?
Yeah, my final thoughts in terms of 5 different things to look at as we move forward. For the SWAC, what does this mean in regards to scheduling? What is it going to look like? Who is going to be the team that goes to the Western Division, particularly in football, and what does it look like for all other sports? Number 2 is the question that you kind of brought up, Roy. What does it mean for the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, better known as the MEAC, moving forward? We'll get the first brevity of that tomorrow morning, and we certainly will give you some insight after we listen to that and provide you some updates of what that looks like. And then third will be, what does this mean for the CIAA in regards to them move forward? Then by product, 4, what does this mean for the SIAC? And what a lot of people don't think about, number 5, because this tends to be a trickle-down effect, what does this mean for the all HBCU NAA conference, better known as the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference? So there's 5 ways that we need to look at this moving forward in terms of the landscape that are immediate changes that we start with the SWAC, and then some of them will be long-range type changes that we'll see in terms of these 5 conferences. And 6, if you allow me to kind of put that team that sits out of this, what does this mean, what we refer to as the independent programs, HBCUs that are member of non-HBCU conferences, i.e. Tennessee State or OVC. And as you also alluded to, Roy, North Carolina A&T and Hampton of the Big South, and then those HBCUs at the Division II and NAI levels that are outside of the general HBCU conference. We speak in specifically those HBCUs, if you would, in the Texas market, Red River Athletic Conference, Langston as a public institution that is in the Sooner Athletic Conference, Everett Waters that we know is currently a member of the GCAC, but as they start their transition that was announced in terms of the SIAC, what does it mean with all these institutions and some of the other independent programs such as UDC, to name a few at the Division II level? What does it look like for them moving forward? So this is going to encapsulate all HBCU programs, either directly or indirectly, and I'm focused on making sure we deliver that content as we move forward.
AD, what's your final thoughts?
You know, they said 2020 was supposed to be the year for a clearer vision. We were going to see 2020 in 2020. Has anything cleared up for us in 2020? Not really. You know, we are just as confused, probably more confused than ever. You've got COVID-19 going on. You've got the things that are going on in society with the Black Lives movement matter. You've got the conference churning, as Dr. Cavil has so eloquently put it. And fellas, we're not even halfway through the year yet. What will the remaining 6 months bring for HBCU sports?
All right. Bryan?
Well, I'm just going to leave you with a final thought. A good tweet of mine on Twitter at Penalty Talk put out there. So who's going to narrate the 30 for 30 about how the MEAC fell apart? And so I thought I would go ahead and in the script. I thought I would go ahead and do the promo. So I'm going to do the promo now. What if I told you that the MEAC almost became a 12-team athletic conference a decade ago? What if I told you several years later, the 50th anniversary of the conference would be their last? Coming up later, the second Exodus. There's your 30 for 30 special. I am available whenever somebody wants that on wax. Whoever's going to do the documentary on the 50 years of the MEAC, I've already pinned the promo, the what if promo. So there we go.
Do you do weddings and bar mitzvahs also, Bryan?
I am looking for work. My teaching salary doesn't kick in until August, so I'm free in July.
So, as my final thoughts, man, I'm gonna start off by once again saying, please make sure you follow all of the different groups here at the Black College Sports Network, the Jericho Broadcast Networks, Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU SportsLab, the BCSN SportsWrap. We are here to give you the information and to make sure that we give you the right and correct information about what's happening in the HBCU landscape and the future of where we're going to be. Definitely, again, please stay tuned to our networks and to our channels. We will have a posting of the time once we get it from A.D. Thompson at Bethune-Cookman. We will be scheduling our live broadcast to speak to him about the move and what he's looking at and how that will impact. We'll probably try to reach out to a couple of other folks down there in Daytona Beach and see if we can get some conversations with them. I'm going to make this my final thought. I'm kind of do an encapsulated pen of both of AD's and Dr. Cavil's, because I refuse to believe that the MEAC is going anywhere. So I'm not even going to address what Bryan just said. But what we have, like I said, what we have right now is an opportunity for HBCU sports to take its place as a serious and major revenue generator, because we have now moved into the space with the SWAC becoming exactly what Dr. McClelland has called it. It is a powerhouse in the southwestern and listen, you don't even have to southeastern part of the country. It is, by adding Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M, they have made some very strong moves that now that all that needs to happen for the MEAC is that they do something similar in their region. Let's get to the point where we bring all of our HBCUs together, not just the MEAC, SWAC, SIAC, and the CIAA, but the folks in the Red River, the folks in the GCAC. The HBCU brand, especially in today's time, has an opportunity to make our schools a lot of money. It has an opportunity to give our student athletes a place to go where they can feel that culture, get the world-class education that they want, as well as still have opportunities to make it to the next level in the different activities and sports that they're engaged in. But what does that mean? And the biggest part of that is the alumni and the fans. You now have to step up. We now have to step up and do more than what we have done in the past. You have to start sacrificing some of the things that you didn't sacrifice before. If we're still serious about that super conference and moving to FBS, listen, the only reason you talk about moving to FBS if you want to compete with the Power Fives, and we know we can do it. So we're going to need everybody's participation in that and everybody being a part of that situation. So for Dr. Cavil and the Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Charles Washington and Mike Bishop, for Bryan Fulford and A.D. Drew of the BCSN SportsWrap, I am Roy Eavins of the Black College Sports Network and the Jericho Broadcast Networks. Until tomorrow, we'll see you. BCU, welcome to the SWAC.
Bye.